Aric Almirola still unsure on his future past 2023. Trackhouse Racing confirms they will not switch Toyota in 2024. And Kyle Busch reveals his 2023 Truck Series schedule. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into this really quickly. We got a lot of paint scheme and sponsorship news first. Let's jump into that first. First, Panini is going to sponsor Greg Gaulding in 2023 for multiple races, including in this season the opening race at Daytona. Great to see Panini jumping back on board and sponsoring Greg Gaulding. They've been a little sponsor for him for many years. Glad to see them returning. Next, Waffle is going to sponsor Emerling for 3 races in 2023. All 3 of those races specifically will be with Joey Gase this season. Lofta joins Emerling. There's been a lot of sponsorship news around Emerling, so glad to see that Lofta is returning. Next, Menards is going to sponsor Matt Crafton in 2023 once again. This is the longest driver and sponsor relationship that a sponsor and a driver have had together for 20 years, which is the longest basically since Richard Petty and SCP when they were sponsored for many years together. So incredible to see that Menards will continue having that sponsorship. I think it's absolutely great to see them continue their partnership. Next, SiriusXM is going to be sponsoring Christopher Bell and Tyler Reddick in 2023. Christopher Bell will be sponsored for 3 races, and Tyler Reddick will have 2 races with the company. SiriusXM has been pretty loyal to both Joe Gibbs racing cars in the past, and also, of course, 2311 is sponsored a 45 car last year. So not a shock and surprise to see that they're sponsoring both Toyota teams in 2023. Next, there was a photo that kind of surfaced around social media last night showing Wendys might be actually sponsoring Noah Gragson in 2023. Now, it's unclear what race it could be sponsoring Noah Gragson if this does end up becoming official, but it sounds like they could actually be sponsoring, I would think maybe a Bristol Dirt, considering the goggles on the side of the car. I think his car looks absolutely really good, and if Wendys is truly sponsoring in 2023, that's going to be really good for the sport. Next, Dana White and Live Fast Motorsports revealed that Slappy is going to be sponsoring BJ McLeod at this year's Daytona 500. Slappy, of course, is owned by Dana White, a brand that's kind of been growing in the last year or two. Really glad to see Slappy will be joining. There's a lot of controversy around that company, but still really glad to see that they are going to be sponsoring BJ McLeod. Next, First Pacific Funny is going to sponsor Jeremy Clements for 6 races in 2023, including a Jeff Bodine throwback that's actually going to be run later down the road this season. This is really cool to see. First Pacific Funny, I believe, has been sponsoring Jeremy Clements' team really now since about 2013, 2014. They've had a pretty big loyal sponsorship Funny, so glad to see that they are going to be returning. I think it's really glad to see that they're back. Glad to see that they are returning. Next, Mac Doors is going to sponsor Brennan Poole for 6 races in 2023. I believe this is a new company to the JD Motorsports brand, so glad to see a new company jumping on. It's really good to see some new companies coming in for 2023. It's, again, awesome to see, and you love seeing new companies come on board and stuff, so absolutely great to see that they are going to be returning in 2023. And I think in general, this is really great for the sport, so glad to see that they're going to be jumping on in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about some truck owners' points changes. Now, Truck Series has some pretty big owners' point changes going into 2023. First, the 98 owners' points will be transferred over to the 13, which, of course, Haley Deegan will drive the 13 truck for ThorSport this year. She's going to be expected to have a pretty good year in 2023. She will get the 98 owners' points. Next, Chandler Smith's old owners' points for 2022 in the Truck Series will get transferred over to the number 2 truck, which, of course, is being driven by Nick Sanchez. Next, the 33 points in the Rayon Brothers Racing team from last year will get transferred over to Roger Caruth's team in 2023. Ty Majeski will basically have different owners' points in the year, though they haven't announced their sponsorship. Roger Caruth's points have been transferred over to Daniel Dyes for this year, and then, of course, the 61 car that was the truck was Chase Purdy's number. Will have their points transferred to the Ram Brothers team for 2023. Next, let's talk about the Xfinity Series owners' points, as they've had some significant changes to their owners' points as well. Ty Gibbs' car from last year, the owner's points in that car, will have their points transferred over to the 18 car that is being driven by Sammy Smith. The 19 points from last year will be also transferred over to the 18 points as well for this season. Actually, for the 20 car, I should say. The 51 and the 35 swapped their points for this season. The 35 points Emerling against Motorsports moved basically be a transfer from the 02 from our Motorsports, which we'll get into them a little later. Get transferred over to the 35 car. The 27 numbers are basically swapping owners' points because basically the 27 is moving to new teams. And the 35 owners' points will have some of their points transferred over to the 25 AM racing car, which is joining the Xfinity Series in 2023. Those are the big changes in owners' points. And now we're going ahead to on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rockford Speedway. As once again, another small track is closing in the country. Rockford Speedway, which has been a significant track up in the north part of Illinois, kind of near that Chicagoland area, they are unfortunately closing in 2023. This is really, really sad and really, really unfortunate. Rockford Speedway is a track that's been around for many, many years. Jack and Al's got his name here from helping his dad. Mark Martin won a lot of races here. So this is really, really sad and really heartbreaking news for the people up in Rockford. And I seriously feel terrible and really bad for them. It just sucks that Rockford's shutting down another significant track in the history of NASCAR. It's just really sad to see and just very disappointing and heartbreaking at the same time that they're closing. So just really unfortunate news and just sucks to see another track closing here in 2023. Hope people can make it out to that track. I would definitely love to make it out maybe this year. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Up next, and let's get into the next story, as we're going to talk about Bozy Tattarevic. As Bozy Tattarevic revealed a couple days ago that he'll be joining Legacy Motor Club in 2023, being a mechanic on the number 84 Legacy Motor Club car, which of course will be piloted by Jimmy Johnson in 2023. This is really, really awesome to see. Bozy's been around the garage for many, many years. He was also an IMSA basically on the number 14 Lexus car, which is really, really great to see. He's been kind of trying to get into NASCAR, and a lot of people are kind of making clues that he was going to get behind as a mechanic for this. So this is really significant to see, really awesome, and happy to see that he will be joining Legacy Motor Club. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Las Vegas F1. As Sports Business Journal put out a tweet and basically put out an article that F1's deal with Las Vegas F1 has already been extended through 2032. Now, it's already crazy to see that their deal has already been extended through 2032. It originally was a 2 or 3 year deal, but even though they have not had a race yet, I think it's because of the American growth in the United States. I think that's a big factor and a major reason why you're seeing a growth and why you're seeing Las Vegas already get extended. But it's good to see that Las Vegas will have a commitment. I think in the long term, it will be the season finale for Formula One, if not already, if it is season finale. So really glad to see that news has come out and glad to see that the F1 deal has been extended. So I think it's really good for them. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tricon Garage, as their 2023 crew chief lineup has been officially unveiled. So Seth Smith is going to be the crew chief for the number 1 truck for Tricon Garage. Derek Smith, the twin of Seth Smith, will be the crew chief for the number 5 truck that, of course, is being piloted by Dean Thompson. Scott Cibadelli moves over from Tottarevic Racing to crew chief the number 11 truck, which, of course, is being piloted by Corey Hyman. Also have Safelight as a sponsor for the season. Jeremy Donnelly, who used to work at Legacy Motor Club, will now be the crew chief for the number 15 truck that, of course, is being piloted by Tanner Gray. Billy Wilbur will be the crew chief for the number 17th truck. That will be piloted for a majority season by Taylor Gray, and also for Sammy, as we'll see it piloted by Sammy Smith for one race. And Matt Pusha is going to be the competition director as well. Really excited to see all these crew chief lineups in changes. Some pretty big pickups for the team, in my opinion. Especially Matt Pusha coming over from RFK and coming into Tricon Garage. A pretty big pickup for the team, and some massive shakeups going on with Tricon Garage. It's pretty big, significant changes going on with the team. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kaulig Racing, as their 2023 crew chief lineup for the Xfinity Series has been officially revealed. So the number 10 truck will have will have the Alex Yance as the crew chief for that one. The 11 car will once again have Justin Trinchero, who of course will crew chief the number 11 car for Daniel Hemrick. And the 16 car, which of course will be piloted by Chandler Smith this season, will have Bruce Schlicker as the crew chief. These are very solid combinations of pairings. I think the 10 and the 11 swap, if I'm not mistaken. If they didn't, this is a really good pairing still. All of them work really well together. Just the team itself has some work to do if they're going to become a really good team again, because they were really good a couple of years ago. It seems like recently, though, they haven't been as good, and I think it's due to them kind of spreading their team a little thin and basically working on their Cup program. But I think with them having more work in Cup, I think Xfinity Series will get a little more focus, and I think it will help their team going into the season. So really great to see this crew chiefs. I think it's a very solid crew chief lineup, and I'm looking forward to the season for Kaulig Racing. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about BJ McLeod. As BJ McLeod was being interviewed by Bob Pockers, and he interviewed a lot of drivers and people in the industry this past week. And BJ McLeod says that the Clash won't be assigned on the season for Live Fast Motorsports. Now, Live Fast Motorsports, of course, was the slowest organization at the Busch Light Clash, but it seemed like they were decent on pace at points in the race. But unfortunately, it was just way too late and too little too late for them to get things sorted out and ready to go for the season. Now, obviously, Live Fast Motorsports are really a team that's kind of still in the work. They just had signed an alliance with Chevy for the season. So it's hopes by the end of the year, and we hope by the end of the year, that we can see the team really improve and be really strong going into the season. So I hope that BJ McLeod's team can really improve, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if it's going to happen. If it can't happen, I think it's going to be really good for this team, because they deserve an opportunity to be really, really good, and I hope they can be a great team going into the season and can improve. They've got Josh Blicky joining the team. There's rumors that Anthony Alfredo might get an opportunity. And if that does happen, it could be really good for this team going into 2023. So excited to see, and hopefully we'll see Live Fast Motorsports be more competitive like they've been in the past. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about some roster updates for the 2023 Daytona 500. So for the number 13 car that is being piloted by Chandler Smith, the crew chief is going to be Eddie Pardue, and Brett Griffin is going to be the spotter. For the number 36 car that, of course, is being piloted by Zane Smith, Chris Lawson is going to be the crew chief, and Tony Raines is going to be the spotter. All people have had a lot of work in their separate types of fields. I think this is a really solid lineup for the roster, and glad to see that this is going to be the roster for this year's Daytona 500 for those two cars. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about JD Motorsports. As TobyCursey.com put out a report earlier today that they will not be fielding the Zero car full-time in 2023. Now, Zero car could run on a part-time basis in 2023, but it will come down to sponsorship and funding. Very similar how a lot of the teams work and such. You're going to have sponsorship funding for your team to really work out. And they were actually supposed to run 3 full-time cars, but like I mentioned and said already, sponsorship funding really came into play, and that's why they will not be running the Zero car on a full-time basis in the 2023 season. It is very disappointing to see, all things considered, because it would have been really cool to see JD Motorsports have 3 full-time entries, but they've got 2 really solid drivers on the team, that of course being Bailey Curry in the 4 and Brendan Poole in the 6. I think that JD Motorsports will still have a very solid season regardless of the situation. I think we could see a pretty good year from JD Motorsports in the 2023 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Cody Rohba. As it was announced earlier today that Cody Rohba is going to drive the 97 for CR7 Motorsports at Daytona. Now, one thing you know about Cody Rohba is he is the owner of this organization. Now, this will be the first time that Cody Rohba, I believe, has raced since either 2021 or 2020. He's been more focused on the ownership side of things instead of racing. But this will also be the first time, I believe, since 2021 that we have seen 2 CR7 Motorsports trucks on the racetrack attempting to make the Daytona opener. Of course, Colby Howard will drive full-time for your first CR7 Motorsports in 2023. This is really exciting to see, and glad to see that Cody Rohba will get an opportunity to attempt to qualify for the season-opening Truck Series event. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Alex Labay. As Alex Labay is going to drive the 36 for DGM Racing in the season-opening Xfinity Series race at Daytona. Now, I'm not sure how the situation is with the owner's points for the 36 car, but Alex Labay, I think, is a very talented driver. It's a shame that he's not full-time with the team. In fact, right now, this is the only race that Alex has planned from what I understand. It's unclear what other race that Alex is going to run this year, but I wouldn't be shocked if he runs all the road course races this season or some of the other races, but if you want my honest opinion, he should be full-time with DGM Racing right now. He's a really talented driver. He knows how to get it done behind the wheel. But I think this is a really cool opportunity regardless for him, and I'm wishing him the best of luck and glad to see that he at least will have some starts with the team. I think there's a good chance he could run more in 2023, but we'll have to wait and see what happens on what other races he decides to run this season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Natalie Decker. As it was announced a couple days ago that Natalie Decker is going to be driving for Emerling Motorsports in 2023. She will not only compete in the Xfinity Series Builder team at Daytona, but also compete in ARCA as well at Daytona as well. Now, it's unclear how many races specifically she is going to run for Emerling Motorsports, but I think it will be quite a few races with the team, probably 3 or 4 races in Xfinity is my guess, and also quite a few ARCA races, considering that car has basically got a lot of races open in ARCA right now. She's probably going to run a lot of races in ARCA. Now, Natalie Decker, we know that she's kind of been making a lot of social media headlines about how she's kind of handled situations, but this could be a really good opportunity for her. She did get a top 5 in the Truck Series, I think, at the Truck Series a couple of years ago. I think it was back in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. But this is still, regardless, a good opportunity for her, and I'm wishing her the best of luck with Emerling Motorsports. I hope she can do a really good job, because let's see what she can do. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Katherine Legge. As Katherine Legge is going to be attempting to qualify for the Indy 500 in 2023, driving a number 44 car for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. That's right, Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing will have 4 entries in 2023. Of course, they will have 3 full-time entries, and of course, for Indy 500, they will have a 4th entry. This is a really awesome opportunity for Katherine Legge. I think she's a very, very talented driver who knows how to get it done behind the wheel, and I think she will do a really, really good job with the Rahal team going into the season. I hope she gets more opportunities, but this is a really cool opportunity for her regardless, and I think she'll make the best of this opportunity in the Indy 500. So I'm excited for her regardless, and glad to see that she will get the opportunity to drive the 44 for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing, which means we'll have confirmed 32 entries so far for this year's Indy 500, which is really, really awesome to see. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Ryan Newman. As Ryan Newman earlier today revealed his 2023 schedule. Among those races that Ryan Newman is going to run, of course, he'll be running the full SRX season in 2023, and will compete in the Whelen Modified Tour NASCAR races and also the Smart Modified Tour races as well. Now, things that are not mentioned is he does not running any of NASCAR's top-tier divisions, which right now I don't think he's going to be coming back anytime soon. Main thing, though, competing for that SRX championship, I think he will be very competitive, and I think he has to be one of the favorites. He nearly won the SRX championship last year, though I do think Ryan Newman is going to have quite a bit of competition this year compared to he's had in previous years. You've got Brad Zossi coming on full-time. You've got Haley Deegan coming on full-time this year, and you've got a lot of competition for 2023, which is really exciting for this year's. And also Bobby Labonte, of course, is jumping full-time once again as well. This is a really cool opportunity, though, and glad to see that Ryan Newman will be racing in 2023. I would love for him to come back to NASCAR's top 3 divisions, but right now, at this moment, it will not be happening in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are going to go ahead and talk about Jesse Love. As Jesse Love is going to drive the one for Tricon Garage in 3 races in 2023. His debut will come at Worldwide Technology Raceway. His second race will be at Kansas in the fall, and his final race in 2023 in the Truck Series will be at Phoenix Raceway. Jesse Love is a very talented up-and-coming driver. He's won quite a few races in the lower-tier series, and this will be the first time he's competing in NASCAR's top 3 divisions. And, of course, we'll be competing at my hometown track as well. I think Jesse Love is going to be one driver to watch this year. They've got some decent talent going into that one truck. Of course, Williams Walsh has already been announced, and also Jason White will also be competing at Daytona as well. I think Jesse Love is really going to make the most of this opportunity. I think he's a very talented up-and-coming driver, and I think he'll do a very excellent job. So I'm expecting to have a very good year going into this year in those races. I could actually see him winning one of the races. I know he doesn't have any experience in trucks, and trucks are different than cars, but I really think he could have a pretty good season, and I'm really excited to see that he'll get some opportunities. Maybe he'll get more opportunities in the lower tier series. Maybe he gets an Xfinity Series opportunity for all we know, but he definitely deserves this opportunity, and glad to see that he will be driving for the team here in 2023. Really looking forward to it. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Chris Wright. As it was confirmed a couple days ago that Chris Wright will drive for Young's Motorsports full-time in 2023 in the number 02 truck. Look, I think Chris Wright probably is a really nice guy, but he does not deserve a full-time opportunity, and here's why. Chris Wright has not impressed in trucks or in any series that he really has ran. He came from IMSA and didn't have a lot of experience, but if you want my honest opinion, he should not be full-time with Young's Motorsports. And I know they're kind of a smaller team overall as well, but like I said, I don't really trust this team. They haven't really been a team that's shown a lot of progress, a lot of pace, and a lot of speed. And I really don't think that Chris Wright is going to come in here and set the world on fire in 2023. In my opinion, I think he's going to be one of the lowest finishers in the championship this year, probably near the bottom of the points, which trucks is going to be really stacked this year. They've got like 30 full-time trucks this year, which is absolutely incredible to see. But I really think that you're going to see Chris Wright struggle in the 2023 season. So I think he struggles quite a bit in 2023, and I think he'll have kind of a bad year in 2023. And I think he'll finish near the bottom of the points once again in 2023, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Todd Gillen. There's been kind of some updates around Todd Gillen in his situation. First, Todd Gillen went ahead and thanked his fans for all the support. Dick went ahead and did a giveaway. Thank fans for all the support with the situation that has been going on. There's also been an update that was reported by Kelly Crandall as well that Todd Gillen is still working on the rest of 2023 in the race that he's not running for Front Row Motorsports, and those races have to be specifically ran with Ford. Now, if you've not been paying attention to what's going on, Todd Gillen basically will not be running 6 of the races this year with Front Row Motorsports in 2023 in the number 38 car because Zane Smith, who of course drives full-time in the truck series for Front Row Motorsports, will be making 6 starts in the number 38 car due to having the sponsorship in funding. Now, of course, like I mentioned with Todd Gillen, that if he's going to race basically Ford this rest of the year and run those races, it'll have to be a Ford. I think there's a couple of potential options. If RFK wants to open a third car, maybe that could be a possibility. I think more than likely he'll drive for Rick Ware or Team Hazenbergs, though. The reason I mentioned Team Hazenbergs is because Team Hazenberg is basically a Ford team, and Josh Rayun basically has kind of talked about maybe giving him an opportunity instead of hook him up and maybe give him an opportunity. Then I, of course, mentioned Rick Ware Racing. Rick Ware Racing has only announced a few races. Of course, Riley Hurts will run all the Super Speedway races, and JGLA ran the Busch Light Clash. Ford, I think, would be very smart to bring Todd Gillen in and give him an opportunity to race with Rick Ware. I think he really could give the best out of equipment and make that equipment run really, really well. Regardless of what happens, though, I wish Todd Gillen the best of luck, and I think we could see Todd Gillen have a shot to be somewhat competitive. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about David Starr. As basically, according to rumblings and rumors and reports and reported by the Crew Chiefs Corner, more than likely by the time you're watching this video, David Starr will be announced that he will be driving a 02 for Our Motorsports full-time in 2023. Yes, heard that right. Our Motorsports, which is a team that has been rumored that they might be shutting their program down in 2022, at the end of 2022, looks to be going full-time in 2023 with David Starr this season. Now, there's rumors as well that David Starr maybe had tried to buy the organization. That's not confirmed, but those are just rumors that have been circulating. Now, David Starr, in my opinion, he's a driver who's a veteran of the series. He hasn't always performed the greatest. Let's be perfectly honest. David Starr has just not always given the best performances on the racetrack. But this is still, regardless, a really good opportunity for him going into the season. And I do believe that he will get the best of this opportunity, whatever he decides to do, which I think, of course, we already know he's going to be with this team. But I think he'll do really, really good with this team this year, or do as good as he can, because the team's kind of been struggling and was kind of at jeopardy at one point. But I still think this is a really cool opportunity, a really good opportunity for him, and I'm very happy to see that David Starr will get the opportunity to drive for this team full-time in 2023. We'll see if he gets the best out of it, and we'll see what he does in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Jimmie Johnson. Now, Oskadensky put out a really good article around Jimmie Johnson about 4 potential races that Jimmie wants to run in 2023. This, of course, all comes from the Rubens Racing podcast that Jimmie Johnson was on. So those 4 races are as follows. North Wilkesboro, the Coke 600, Dover, and Circuit of the Americas. Those are 4 of the races that Jimmie Johnson does want to run. Now, Jimmie Johnson could run up to as many as 10 NASCAR Cup Series races in 2023. He's already announced 2 official races that he's going to run in 2023. The first one, of course, being the Daytona 500, which takes place next week. But, of course, he has to attempt to qualify for the race. He also confirmed about a week ago at the LA Clash that he is going to be running the Chicago Street Course event as well. Now, this is really cool to see that Jimmie wants to enter more races, though, in 2023, because remember, he's also going to be running the Garage 56 entry at Le Mans in early June. So that's going to be fun to watch as well. But Jimmie Johnson getting the opportunity, wanting to run more races, I think is really good for the sport as well. And I think it's great that Jimmie wants to come back and run a lot more races. And I think Jimmie could be somewhat competitive, though he has not been a NASCAR Cup Series car since 2020. So he might be a little rusty, but he has been getting a lot of experience. He did test the next-gen car, of course, at that Phoenix test about 2 weeks ago. So he does have a little bit of experience now, but he could still be a little bit rusty. Whatever races Jimmie decides to run, it'll be really cool to see. Hope he gets to run the race that he wants to run, and I hope he gets to run up to 10 to 12 races, because I think he's getting that itch again, and maybe in the long-term future, out of nowhere, and almost at the age of 50, we'll see maybe Jimmie Johnson come back full-time. That could be a stretch, but anything is possible, and there's no guarantees. So we can see Jimmie Johnson make a return in the future, but we'll have to watch and see what happens on what races Jimmie does actually decide to run in the future. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talk about the short track package. Now, of course, there's been a lot of talk about the short track package around NASCAR as of very recently. Now, Matt Weaver put out a really good article around the short track package about NASCAR planning to make some pretty big changes to the next-gen car on the short tracks and the road courses, basically lowering the downforce on the cars. Now, the reason they want to make changes is to make the racing product better. Drivers basically talked about it as wanting things that still need to be changed on that short track package. One of the things, obviously, is basically issues with the splitter on the front of the car. They want those changed. And NASCAR, of course, the reason they want to change this is to make the racing product as good as possible for the short tracks and road courses. Obviously, if you watched short track and road course racing in 2022, you saw some of the worst racing of 2022. Bristol wasn't as good as it's been in the past. Martinsville Spring was absolutely horrendous and was very difficult to pass. You could not pass at all. And the road courses in general, outside of Circuit Americas and probably Watkins Glen, were really just awful races in general. So the reason that they want to make these changes is to make the racing product as good as it can be. So whatever changes NASCAR decides to do, I'm here for it. I think whatever they can do to fix the problems, they need to absolutely be fixed. And if they can fix that, I think in general, it will be really, really good for the sport. So whatever they decide to do, hope we can fix those changes, and we'll see what happens with the next gen changes. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about AJ Allmendinger. As it was announced earlier today that AJ Allmendinger is going to drive the 10 for Call Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series for up to 5 Xfinity Series races in 2023. His first Xfinity Series race is going to be at Circuit of the Americas. He joins a list of drivers who already will be driving a 10 car in 2023, as of course the 10 car will be an all-star car in 2023. You will see Austin Dillon in the car for a couple races, and you will also see Justin Haley in the 10 car for a few races as well. And now AJ Allmendinger joins the team and could potentially also see Kyle Busch driving an Xfinity Series in that car as well. Now, when I think of AJ driving a 10 car, especially at Circuit Americas and especially at the road courses, you have to look at AJ Allmendinger as one of the favorites to win the event, because AJ has a lot of that road course experience and is arguably the greatest Xfinity Series road course racer ever, and could win some Cup Series road courses as well in 2023. I think you're going to see him be very competitive in that number 10 car. I think he'll be very strong, and I think he will easily win the COTA race. I know there's going to be a lot of competition in that race. You can have some really talented Xfinity Series guys at every organization, but I really think AJ is going to get the best out of that equipment, and I think he's going to do a really solid job, and I think he's going to be ultra competitive, and I think he's going to be extremely competitive. So I expect him to be very competitive, and I think AJ will be able to go out and win the COTA race and probably win a few more Xfinity Series races in 2023, because when he's running a road course race especially, he is the favorite. So I think he'll be a fat threat and will win in 2023, not only in Cup, but also in the Xfinity Series with Call Racing, and we'll see what other drivers do decide to run the 10 car this upcoming season. And now we're going to ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Maya Sider. As it was officially announced yesterday that Maya Sider is going to drive the 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing in 2023 on a part-time basis. His first start is going to come at Daytona. After that, he'll be racing at Portland. Then a run for playoff races, which those are the Charlotte Roval, Las Vegas, Martinsville, and Phoenix. Maya Sider joins a small list of drivers that all being announced to drive the number 19 for Joe Gibbs Racing. Those, of course, being Ryan Truex, Connor Mosack, and Joe Graf Jr. Now, look, do I think Maya Sider is a really awesome driver? No, I think Maya Sider is mid at best. However, Maya Sider is a pretty decent road course racer, so when I look at the race that Maya Sider is running in 2023, I circle Portland in the Charlotte Roval. The reason being is because it seems like those are the types of tracks where he performs really well. Look at Portland last year, for example, with Jordan Anderson racing. That was one of the few races where Maya Sider really stood out. He was leading with a few laps to go and got passed by Aric Almirola with around 5 to 6 laps to go in the event. So he's a good road course racer, so I really do believe that you're going to see Maya Sider be competitive at Portland and be competitive at the Charlotte Roval. And I think he'll do a very solid job with Joe Gibbs Racing. He could win a race this year. I'm not guaranteeing that he is going to win a race in 2023, but I do think that I'm a little more confident in him winning a race with Joe Gibbs Racing than, let's say, Joe Graf Jr. or maybe even other drivers at that team in the number 19 car. This still is not great that Maya's going to be part-time. Again, the reason Maya's part-time is because I think his sponsorship and funding, that's why he's not full-time with an organization this season. Still, though, this is a good opportunity for Maya Sider. I think he'll be somewhat competitive in the number 19 car. He'll have Treetop incorporated as a sponsor for all of his races. This is a really good opportunity for him, and glad to see that Maya Sider will have a ride, at least for select races in 2023, and we'll see what he can do in the 2023 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. He could win, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 3 major stories in today's episode as we are talking about Kyle Busch. Now, his 2023 Truck Series schedule has been revealed for 2023, and of course, he will run 5 Truck Series races in 2023 with Xeris Transport as the sponsor. One thing to note, Michael Carey designed that truck, so shout out to him for designing the truck. But the 5 races that Kyle Busch will run in 2023 are as follows. He'll run at Las Vegas, then a race at Circuit of the Americas, then a race at Martinsville in the spring, then Kansas in the spring, and his final race will be at Pocono in the late summer. Kyle Busch obviously always runs 5 races in every single Truck Series season because that's the limit that he is allowed to run every single year. This also converts 15 of the confirmed races that we have for the 51. Jack Wood's going to run 10 truck races, and Kyle Busch will run 5. Now, with Kyle Busch transitioning over to Chevy, some people think Kyle Busch is going to struggle because some people don't think he's going to run well in those select races. I completely disagree. I think despite the fact that Kyle Busch is going to be a Chevy, and it seemed like the Chevy horsepower last year in 2022 was not as good as it was in 2021 or previous years, I still think Kyle Busch is going to get the best out of that equipment, and I truly believe that Kyle Busch is going to be really strong this season in the trucks race as well, especially in Cup as well, but this, of course, will also be the first time he's driving with the Chevy camp since 2007, but I think Kyle Busch will be very, very competitive, and I think he really is going to get the best out of the equipment. If you want my prediction, he's going to get 2 wins in the Xfinity Series. I look at that Coda truck race where he was really strong last year. He probably should have won the race in 2022. I think he's going to be really fast, very, very competitive, and I expect Kyle Busch to be extremely fast in those races and be the favorite to win. Despite being with Chevy, despite being in a truck with less power, I think Kyle Busch will be quick. And glad to see, though, that Kyle Busch is going to be in select truck races. I think he'll do a solid job. I also don't have a problem with it, but I'm glad to see, regardless, Kyle Busch getting an opportunity to drive with his own organization for a select few Truck Series races in the 2023 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Trackhouse Racing. Now, I kind of talked about this on the channel a couple days ago, but I feel like I didn't really get my point across. So Justin Marks was on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio as of recently, and he was asked about if his team could be switching manufacturers in 2024 or not. Well, Justin Marks confirmed with SiriusXM NASCAR Radio that he will not be switching manufacturers over to Toyota or Ford in 2024 and plans to stick with Chevy long term. The reason that they were asked is because a lot of people think with Trackhouse Racing how crazy they've made changes and how big of changes they've already made. A lot of people thought Trackhouse Racing was going to switch to Toyota. Another reason is because Toyota is trying to recruit as many teams from the Chevy and the Ford camp because they want to expand heading into 2024. We heard this from David Wilson as recently as about 2 weeks ago that they would like to expand and basically expand their program and have more organizations. This is not a shocker or surprise that Trackhouse does not want to expand in 2020. Well, Trackhouse does not want to switch over to Toyota. They have a really big commitment with Chevy. Of course, they got a lot of stuff from Chip Ganassi Racing. It would be a little bit more difficult and probably still be a little easier to switch nowadays, but I think it makes a lot of sense for Trackhouse Racing not to switch their manufacturer, basically stay with Chevy, because they've had a lot of success with Chevy in the 2 years they've been around. You don't want to jeopardize that partnership, and I think it would make a lot of sense. But now we get to some teams that could switch manufacturers, because there's been some talk about Toyota wanting to expand and get some teams. There's a couple teams that could switch in 2024. One of those being JTG Doherty Racing. Now, why did I mention JTG Doherty Racing? Well, you see, JTG Doherty Racing actually used to be a Toyota team from 2009 to 2013. And also, they basically have Joe Gibbs Racing pit crew members. I don't think JTG really has alliance with anybody, and I think if they went to Toyota and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. went to Toyota as well, they actually would be pretty competitive on the racetrack and would show some great pace and speed. So I think we could see them switch. Another team that could potentially switch, Joe, I don't think it's 100% expected, but I think this could happen, is Front Row Motorsports. I remember it's about a year and a half ago, or even almost 2 years ago, Front Row Motorsports almost actually switched to Toyota. It even sold their organization off to give a charter to 2311 Racing. They almost integrated into 2311 Racing. So I think Front Row is actually also a pretty high potential possibility as well to switch. So that could be a possibility as well. And then you think about some of the teams in the lower series that could jump up the Cup. Obviously, Tricon Garage, so people think that could be a possibility. You've got AM Racing that's rumored in some essence. They were rumored to jump up the Cup. But I think regardless, so it's still going to be a major story to watch when it comes to what teams are going to switch and what happens, because I think silly season is going to be so crazy despite the fact that we're not expecting a lot of major changes going into the season. We could see some teams make some pretty big splashes and changes. Ricker Racing could be the team that switches as well for all we know, because they already switched their alliance. They could switch manufacturers in the future. It'll be one thing to watch going forward, but at least we know for sure Trackhouse Racing will not be one of those organizations that'll switch in 2023. It's not surprising, 2024 I should say. It's not shocking or surprising, but we will not see changes with that team in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Aric Almirola. Now, I've already kind of talked about this on the channel not too long ago, but we kind of have more to talk about Aric Almirola's future. Now, some people said Aric Almirola will retire at the end of 2023. Others have said Aric Almirola has a multi-year deal with the team, and he's not going to be leaving the team. Well, Jenna Fryer put out a tweet earlier tonight that kind of talked about potential future for Aric Almirola. He was at a Tampa hockey game, and he says that he's still kind of unsure on what his future is going to look like past 2023. He basically kind of talked about the thought process of what happened last year, where he said he actually initially announced a timer on my birthday last year, and then in August he decided to change his mind and came back. Now, obviously, of course, Aric Almirola could potentially be in a contract year. Yes, I know people have mentioned that he is on a multi-year deal, but contracts can be easily broken. I believe that second year is currently an option year for Aric Almirola. Now, Aric Almirola, of course, is also a little bit of an older driver as well. Aric Almirola, I believe, next year will turn 40 years old, so he is a driver who has a lot of veteran experience. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I think Aric Almirola is kind of been showing 1 foot out. I know that he had a solid performance at the LA Clash before he basically kind of fell out near the end of the event and kind of fell off near the end of the event. But Aric Almirola, I feel like he's got 1 foot out the door, and I think the biggest key thing will be Smithfield. If Smithfield wants to stick around with Aric Almirola long term, I could see Aric Almirola returning. However, I think there is also a really strong chance that Aric Almirola could retire at the end of the 2023 season, though it's not guaranteed. But if he does retire at the end of 2023, what drivers could replace Aric Almirola? Well, one driver I can see replacing him is Zane Smith. Now, Zane Smith isn't a multi-year deal with Rambo Motorsports, but he is a really high, big, and hot prospect driver at Ford right now, and I think Ford is going to try to potentially court him over to Trackhouse Racing. But I also think Rambo is going to want to keep Zane Smith long-term, so I could see that happening, and I think anything is possible, but Zane Smith could be a possibility. Another one is Riley Herbst. Now, Riley Herbst obviously, of course, drives full-time in the Xfinity Series for Trackhouse Racing. He's got sponsorship funding, so he could absolutely be a potential prospect that could go over to that team next year. Another one that a lot of people have not mentioned, but I've seen Ford do some crazy stuff, and they might want to move her up. Hailie Deegan. She's got Monster Energy sponsorship and funding, and I know people think are not too crazy on her moving up, and trust me, I don't want her to move up as well. But you know Ford is going to want to be thinking about the future, and they might want to move her up. So that could be a possibility, but I'm not guaranteeing it, but that could be something to watch. But going back and talking about this in general with Aric Almirola, like I mentioned, I feel like he's got one foot out the door. And I have a feeling that this could actually be his last year, but I also think there's a chance he could return in 2024, which I think there's a chance he can return. If you want my opinion right now, though, on Aric Almirola and if he'll return or not in 2024, I think it's 50-50 right now. He could go either way. He could retire at the end of the year, or he could come back in 2024. I think anything is possible at this point for this team, and they can make some big blockbuster moves, and it could be something that we've not seen before. So I think it's possible that he does return in 2024, but also he could retire at the end of the year. I think he's one of the biggest questions and basic questionnaires, so it'll be one thing to watch regardless and see what happens, but it could be his last year in 2024, and we'll see what Aric Almirola decides to do, but next year could be Aric Almirola's final season. So, that is your today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, notifications on to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment below your thoughts below on today's video. What are your thoughts about the Aric Almirola news? Do you think Aric Almirola retires or returns in 2024? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories we discussed here today on the channel, including Trackhouse Racing not switching to Toyota? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, I'm not sure what's going to be on the channel. It could be a paint scheme video, but we'll have to wait and see. I have a video on teams that could switch Toyota in 2024 coming either Saturday or Sunday. We got a lot of content on the way coming out in the future as we get closer to the start of Speedways. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.